All right, everyone, we got a lot to go over today. Look, we are not talking about the sales data and all that. We actually did that in a video super early this morning. But what we do have is a whole bunch of news going on, including the Virtual Boy stuff coming back in stock. We're going to show you that live. That's going to be pretty exciting here. We have actually some words coming from Shintaro Furukawa today as well. And there's probably going to be more of this coming up over the coming days and through the end of the week because there is an investors Q&A happening basically right now. But we have a really important message from him that heavily indicates Nintendo will probably not be raising the prices of Switch 2 at least this year and maybe ever. We'll have to obviously wait and see on that. We do have a major third-party game that actually has gone on pause, and we have to talk about what's probably not being said about why that's happening. More than that, we have another third-party game that's hoping to come to Nintendo Switch 2. So, we do have to obviously focus on that a little bit as well. And we're going to be talking about the fact that there was a massive preview event going on for the Nintendo Switch 2 and various games, including Mario Tennis Fever, we're talking about Mario Wonder and the Bella Bella Park update, Resident Evil, Pragmata, all that stuff. We're going to be talking about that as well because actually quite impressive stuff looking today with that. And you know what, guys? We just are here to talk about some news. This is pretty exciting. No rumors in this one. Straight up news. Really excited. We haven't had a straight up news, just news video besides the one this morning in a while. So before we dive in, I just want to remind you we're on the road to 200,000 subscribers. It all begins by getting to 162. We already got to 61 last month. It'd be really cool if we can get to 62. 162, get 1,000 subscribers per month. Every month would be insane. So let's just do it. And that being said, let's go ahead and dive into the news. And the very first story we're going to talk about is actually the bunch of previews that dropped today from an event that happened at Nintendo New York. This was a media event that some content creators were invited to. I'm mostly going to be talking about stuff that Rogers Base put up. In fact, here's his video. We're going to be kind of skipping through his video a little bit. And look, Rogers Base is going to be on the podcast tomorrow. So one reason I wanted to feature this because we will be asking him questions about his experience playing these games. He did obviously give a quick overview and summary, but obviously we can get to some of the nitty gritty details. And look, there's a few things that we learned from at least Rogers Base preview on this. One is that Mario Wonder and the Bella Bella Park update, he doesn't really seem that excited for it. It seems to be mostly a multiplayer mini game update. And it kind of feels like something that he says would fit seemingly more in place with something like, I don't know, Mario Party. But all the mini games they had were actually really, really fun. So no complaints on the mini games themselves, but it was mostly a single player experience with some multiplayer aspects in Mario Wonder. And, they didn't really add a ton of single player content, at least from what we're seeing here. So, he's not super excited for it. Might not even pick it up, but we'll see. He said he might do it on a live stream or something. But there's other stuff you got to play as well. Two of the games you got to play is obviously Resident Evil 9 Requiem, right? Resident Evil Requiem and Pragmata. Two games coming from, Capcom. And look, if you've not been living under a rock all day, or if you've just been focused on the sales data today, you might not have realized that these games look extremely impressive on Nintendo Switch 2. We don't have the exact specs or anything like exact resolutions and all of that stuff. But one thing that seems to be really exciting is Resident Evil 9 Requiem was running at seemingly a rock solid 60 FPS in handheld and in docked mode. In fact, some people actually commented today that in docked mode, especially for people who have already played a demo of this game on PS5 or PC, they honestly didn't really notice a bunch of visual differences outside of the aforementioned hair that we noticed last year, where clearly with DLSS and some other stuff going on, the hair is not coming in as good as it is on the other versions visually. But everything else in the game seems to be, from what they could tell, up to visual power. Now, obviously, we're going to have to wait and see the actual exact comparisons. I'm sure there's resolution differences. There could be some lighting differences. I don't know. But from everything they're saying, man, it sounds like this is a really damn good version of Resident Evil 9. And the same can really be said for Pragmata. It seems like a really damn good version of Pragmata. Honestly, it feels like Capcom is just working absolute wizardry on these games. And that alone is really exciting, especially when you consider Capcom has such a good library of content that would be perfect on Nintendo Switch 2. We already know there's work being done on Monster Hunter Wilds, just no official announcement yet. Maybe we hear about that in a potential partner showcase this week. But yeah, this is really good stuff. Capcom continues to be a major partner for Nintendo, and this just bodes really well for all future Capcom games coming over. 60 FPS in these games. That is awesome. Everyone always complains the third-party games at 30 FPS, and then Capcom comes in and just shows everyone, hey, you don't got to do that. How about some 60 FPS action? Last thing he talks about really is Mario Tennis. And the big thing with Mario Tennis Fever is he actually found this to be the most enjoyable experience he played there. Like, pleasantly surprised at how good the game plays, how good it feels, the content he was able to do. It's honestly, he said, the most excited he's been for Mario Tennis, really going back to maybe even the Game Boy Advance days, which is man, you remember that Mario Tennis game? That was one of the best ones of all time. So again, obviously just a preview. This is not the full game or the full content. And obviously, not like you played all the way through the single player adventure mode and was able to just know if it's like a perfectly amazing mode or if it ends up being kind of a letdown like it was with Aces. But either way, this is really good news from the previews. Now, we're going to have to wait for the reviews. The game comes out next week, so the reviews are coming next week. So we'll obviously know if this actually lives up to the hype of the previews. And honestly, when you listen and watch other previews and read other previews out there, everyone seems to be glowing about this Mario Tennis game. So we'll have to wait, though. I was glowing on Mario Tennis Aces coming out of E3 when I played it for Switch there. But again, it's such a vertical slice of the game. It's not always indicative of the final product. So we'll just have to wait and see when the reviews drop. But hey, so far, so good on that front. Next up, we have a little bit of an update on something we talked about a while back, originally reported by Stefan Totillo in GameFile. And that was there were some lawsuits filed against Nintendo of America and Tech Systems. And these were like labor disputes, and they had to do with like wrongful firings and all of that. And well, the big update today is, those 3 labor complaints against Nintendo of America and contracting firm Tech Systems have been withdrawn, including 2 filed since December. And no explanation was given for why they're withdrawn. They're just withdrawn. And he broke the news of these complaints, last month. Again, we covered this, and all 3 had claimed violations as part of the National Labor Relations Act that bars employees from interfering with or restraining employees from their right to self-organize. And literally, there's no explanation. It just went away. Now, obviously, some people might speculate that was there like a backdoor payment to these people? Were they rehired potentially? Or maybe the lawyers representing this case realized you guys don't actually have a case. They did rightfully terminate you. And we have to move on. Like, whenever you hear like things get dropped with this with no explanation, oftentimes that's in the process of discovery, either by Nintendo's lawyers or the lawyers, representing these 3 people. Usually there's something that happened in the discovery that was a massive red flag that was like, hey, actually, you don't really have a case. That's typically what comes from stuff like this. But again, we don't actually know why it was dropped. That is my own speculation that potentially they just really didn't have a case to begin with. But we don't really know what happened, and I don't know if we ever will, as is the case, and as is their legal right to not share that information. Next up, are you excited for Romeo as a Dead Man? I don't blame you if you are. The game looks amazing and is amazing. Well, it might be coming to Switch 2 because Grasshopper wants to make it happen. So Grasshopper is still exploring how to bring Romeo as a Dead Man to Switch 2, including a physical release. Hopefully full physical. You always got to wonder what they mean by physical release. Anyways, Romeo's Dead Man, you take control of protagonist Romeo Stargazer as a third-person single-player action adventure split into various chapters. But we've seen numerous interviews over the last few months where Suda51 talked about his desire to bring Romeo as a Dead Man to Switch 2, and those efforts are continuing in earnest. In a chat with Game Reactor, Suda51 made it more clear than ever that the team is working hard to make Switch 2 release possible. All right, here's what they said. Yeah, we really do want to put the game out on Switch 2. At the moment, we're kind of right in the middle of trying to work out a whole bunch of different things. We're trying to figure out what we can do to make that happen, one way or another. We're investigating several different possibilities. I guess you could say that's something, if possible, we definitely want to do. Also, this may come up in a later question, but another thing that a lot of people have been asking for is a physical version of the game. Of course, for various platforms, that's another thing that we're currently looking into different avenues for. Another thing that, if possible, we would definitely like to do as well. So yeah, while we can't make any promises or give any kind of deadlines or anything, but getting it on the Switch 2 somehow, and if possible, getting our physical versions out, we're seeing everybody's comments, we're hearing everybody's voices, we're working on it. So yeah, they definitely feel like they really really want to get this game running on Nintendo Switch 2, whether they do it themselves, whether they're exploring port studios. That could be one thing they're working on. Really hope they're not considering the streaming option. Please don't be doing that. That's just, you might as well just send it to the graveyard, not even bother at that point. So yeah, I think they're just considering whether they're going to do it themselves or they're going to get a port studio. What port studio do you use? How much do they want to invest in this? Maybe if they do it themselves, they find out that maybe it's not as hard as they thought to do it. Just kind of throwing it out there. Now, we have an update as well coming from Shintaro Furukawa, a couple pieces here. And this has to do with the potential for a price increase for Switch 2. We've seen Shintaro Furukawa have to address this in numerous interviews, and he addressed it today. Seems to really indicate Nintendo is not going to increase the prices. But the first story that broke today actually were some interviews of Reuters and others here. Nintendo talks memory cost concerns and again leaves room for the Switch 2 price increase. We get down here with the interview and it says, we will carefully consider the matter of a Switch 2 price hike when taking a comprehensive look at the state of adoption of the platform, current sales trends, cost, profitability, market environment, and other factors. If prices continue to rise for a long period of time, it could put pressure on profits from the next fiscal year onwards. And then David Gibson comes in here to just point out something right now that Nintendo's Shintaro Furukawa said here. And it goes as this: Nintendo CEO, our priority is to drive wider adoption of the hardware and then work to improve profitability by maximizing software sales. And he says, I would think that means Switch 2 price does not change because of memory prices. Thanks, Nintendo. And that seems pretty obvious here that Nintendo's focus right now seems to be, hey, let's just get Switch 2 in as many hands as possible, and we will make up for things with software sales. Now, Nintendo does traditionally like to profit off their hardware, and it is possible the hardware becomes profitable here in the next year or two. We don't really know. Obviously, with the RAM prices and everything else going crazy, it might delay the profitability of the platform. But if they can get enough users out there, software sales will massively increase, and the profits will start flowing in. This is basically the PlayStation strategy, the Xbox strategy. You sell at a loss. You try to build an install base, you make up for it with software and subscription services. And Nintendo thinks they can probably make up for it with software sales. It's just not a strategy Nintendo likes to employ, but they know the state of the economy. They know the system's already considered expensive. Raising the price right now would not be a good look and potentially harm the adoption rate and thus hurt software sales. So they seem to be taking the approach, or at least are leaning towards that, hey, we don't really want to change any prices. We just want to get as many people to own a Switch 2 as possible. That way we can actually sell a ton of software. So I guess it's mostly good news. At least it sounds good. I don't know. Obviously, Nintendo can change their mind anytime. Next up, well, if you were looking forward to Borderlands 4 on Switch 2, you're probably going to have to wait. And we might have to wait till there's a Game of the Year edition, in fact. Let's go over this here. So Take-Two pauses Borderlands 4. Nintendo Switch 2 release. CEO addressing pulling GTA Online. User created Charlie Kirk mission. We don't care about that aspect of the story, but we do care about the actual Borderlands part. So Take-Two Interactive revealed it is pausing development on the Switch 2 edition of Borderlands 4 in its latest quarterly earnings results Tuesday. The title Switch 2 release was removed from Take-Two's chart of upcoming games, where it was previously listed as having a TBA release date, which prominently features Rockstar's Grand Theft Auto 6, debuted on November 19th, along with WWE 2K26 March 13th, and several undated projects like the next BioShock game. We made the difficult decision to pause development on that SKU, Take-Two spokesperson Alan Lewis told Variety. Our focus continues to be on delivering quality post-launch content for players, on the ongoing improvements to optimize the game. We're continuing to collaborate closely with our friends at Nintendo. We have PGA Tour 2K25 coming out, and WWE 2K26 for Switch 2, and we're incredibly excited about bringing more of our titles to that platform in the future. Now, they kind of go over some stuff here. A little bit how they kind of suggest they're also trying to focus on making sure that GTA 6 gets across the finish line. Don't know what that really has to do with Gearbox, since Gearbox doesn't work on GTA. That being said, this game was available to play at various events. I've actually played Borderlands 4 on Switch 2. And, well, yeah, it was a little rough around the edges frame rate wise. It was definitely enjoyable and a playable experience, but it needed a little bit of optimization work, despite Randy Pritchford confidently announcing that when it was coming out last year. Randy, you got to stop doing that, buddy. I think there's obviously a greater issue here because they talked about how they're working on content and expanding the game. At this point in the game's life, Borderlands 4 is actually lacking a lot of content compared to prior releases, and it's been one of the big criticisms of the game since launch. Is like there just isn't a whole lot to do once you get to a certain part in the game, and the content additions have been so slow coming out. So what I think happened is they decided to pull the development team off the Switch 2 version to focus on actually making new content for the game. And then once that content comes out, maybe they do like a Game of the Year edition or something like that, as they've done for prior Borderlands games, despite never winning Game of the Year. And then have that come out and on Switch 2, and maybe that's the version that Switch 2 eventually gets. Look, it's a little... They obviously just didn't have the dev kits for very long, or it would have been day and date anyways. So I'm just going to leave it at that. I don't really know what else there is to say. They left out that context, but yeah, I don't know. Take it for what you will. Borderlands 4 kind of came and went. People forgot about it. A lot of people think it might be the worst entry in the series. I'm not going to go that far. Haven't played enough of it to know. Next up, we have some updates that have to do with the Virtual Boy coming to Switch 2. First off, hey, do you happen to have a Nintendo Labo VR Toy-Con goggles hanging around? Well, guess what? They work with Virtual Boy games. Yeah, seriously. You still got that Labo stuff around. It's insane. Nintendo said a few times now that if you want to play Virtual Boy games on your Switch or Switch 2, you'll need to have one of their Virtual Boy accessories that are sold through the Nintendo Store. We originally were told there were two options to choose from: the $100 plastic accessory, $25 cardboard. There's actually a third method, thanks to Video Game Chronicle. Fans of the Nintendo Labo series know that Nintendo Labo eventually dabbled in virtual reality with Nintendo Labo 4 VR kit, which included VR Toy-Con goggles. While part of the kit includes a plastic frame with special lenses, it also had a cardboard housing, just as pretty much everything Nintendo Labo related did. Some have been wondering if the VR Toy-Cons would work with Nintendo Classic Virtual Boy games, and it's actually confirmed. During a recent press event that allowed for hands-on Nintendo Classics with Virtual Boy, you can see their own impressions, a Nintendo Treehouse staffer confirmed to GamesBeat that the Labo VR Toy-Con goggles will indeed work for Virtual Boy games on Switch. Obviously, the Toy-Con goggles won't work on the Switch 2, as that system's actually bigger. Maybe you could custom retrofit. I don't know. It probably won't work, though. So there you go. If you happen to have those goggles laying around, you can use them for Virtual Boy. But speaking of Virtual Boy, happy to note that things are back in stock as well. We have the $25 cardboard model here, and then obviously we have the $100 plastic model here. It is notable, of course, that you do need to be a Nintendo Switch Online member to make these purchases. Of course, you have to be a Nintendo Switch Online expansion pack member to even use Virtual Boy. So I don't know that that's really that big of a deal, but I wanted to throw that all out there. And that's pretty much going to do it. We obviously will be live tonight. I'm hoping to be live pretty shortly after this video actually goes live, because I want to try to get live on time tonight for once. And setting that aside, folks, I want to thank you so much for being here. Be sure to tune into our podcast tomorrow, the Nintendo by Podcast. I believe we have Favlam coming back and Rogers Base. Again, we will be asking Rogers Base about all of his hands-on experience with those various upcoming games for Switch 2 and even the Virtual Boy accessory. And then we're just going to chill a little bit. We have a lot to talk about. We're kind of anticipating that there's going to be an announcement of a partner showcase direct tomorrow morning. So look forward to me giving you a video tomorrow morning on that. And obviously, we'll be doing some direct bingo and stuff like that as well. And actually, we're going to be having a conversation during the podcast dealing with exclusives and their viability in the market, because it's become a kind of a hot button topic this week among various gaming places like Reddit, X, Blue Sky, and even some YouTube videos debating on the value of exclusive games, as Nintendo seems to be one of the last bastions of hardware makers holding on to exclusives as Sony continues to make more and more of their games multi-platform, at least to PC. So we'll have to wait and see. But otherwise, folks, I am Nathaniel Robojets from Nintendo Prime. It's going to be a fun debate and conversation, and we'll catch you in the next video.